Sometimes people are rude not because of who you are, but because of what they carry inside. Still, that doesn't mean you have to take it. In this video, I'll share 6 calm and simple phrases you can say that make a rude person stop and maybe even regret their words. Let's begin with something gentle but powerful. One of the most grounding things you can say when someone speaks to you with disrespect is, "I'm sorry you feel the need to speak to me that way." It's calm, it's clear, and it quietly returns the discomfort to where it belongs. Now, I want to take a moment to talk about why these moments can hit harder as we get older. As we age, many of us become more reflective, more sensitive to tone and intention. That's not weakness, it's wisdom and awareness. But it also means that when someone is unkind or dismissive, especially in public or routine settings, it can cut deeper. You've likely spent a lifetime building who you are, and being reduced to someone in the way or out of touch is deeply painful. It chips away at dignity if we let it. And for older adults, especially those living alone or adjusting to new physical limits, words can feel louder, heavier. So when rudeness comes, especially repeatedly, it doesn't just sting, it lingers. It creates doubt, and you might begin to wonder if something really is wrong with you. But please hear me when I say this, nothing is wrong with you. The way someone else speaks says everything about them, and nothing about your worth. You are not the problem, and I've seen this play out many times in my work. I remember one of my clients, Paul, a 73-year-old retired mechanic from Ohio. He's sharp, witty, still drives himself to the local diner every morning. But there was a young man working at the grocery store who always made snide remarks when bagging Paul's items. "Need help finding your cane?" Or, "I'll speak up so you can hear me." Paul laughed it off at first, but after a while it wore him down. He started shopping at odd hours just to avoid the kid. During one of our sessions, he shared this with me, and I suggested he try a line that didn't attack, but didn't let the behavior slide either. The next time it happened, Paul looked him in the eye and said, "I'm sorry you feel the need to speak to me that way." No anger, just clarity. He told me the young man looked stunned. There was a long pause, and then he muttered an apology. He never joked again. Another example, Deborah, 76, from Santa Fe, a retired teacher, had a neighbor who constantly made little digs about her garden. "Looks like your weeds are winning," he'd say. She tried to ignore it, but it chipped away at her peace. One afternoon she replied softly, "I'm sorry you need to say things like that." He didn't respond, but she said the energy changed. It didn't stop him completely, but it stopped her from shrinking. What often helps in these moments is having one calm sentence ready, just one. You don't need to fight, argue, or explain. You just need to put the weight of their words back where it belongs, on them. "I'm sorry you feel the need to speak to me that way." It's not sarcastic, it's not defensive. It's a gentle boundary that says, "I noticed and I won't carry that for you." One of the simplest ways to protect your dignity is by staying calm, but being firm in your words. You don't have to match their tone. You don't have to raise your voice. All you have to do is say something that reflects who you are, not who they're trying to make you. You are not here to make others comfortable at the cost of your peace. You have a right to be treated with respect, no matter where you are or who you're speaking to. And if someone forgets that, you have every right to remind them, gently but clearly, that you see what's happening. You are not invisible. You are not less. You have the wisdom of years behind you, and that deserves to be honored, not mocked. Even if you don't always get the apology, you'll walk away with something far better, your head held high. Here's another phrase that quietly changes the tone without starting a fight. Your words say more about you than they do about me. It may sound simple, but it can bring a surprising pause to someone who's trying to bring you down, and it helps you stand firmly in your worth without needing to explain or justify. Let's take a moment to understand why this matters, especially as we age. When people speak harshly to us, it often has little to do with anything we've done. But after 60, especially in a culture that tends to idolize youth, we may start absorbing the message that we're less than, even when we know it's not true. A single rude comment can echo for days, triggering past insecurities or magnifying feelings of loneliness or being left behind. Many older adults tell me that even small slights, being ignored in a store, being spoken to slowly like a child, being brushed off, can feel enormous. And they're right. It's not just about the words, it's about the erosion of respect that those words symbolize. When someone treats you like you're less, it can make you question yourself. But remember, cruelty often comes from discomfort, insecurity, or projection. Saying your words say more about you than they do about me is like holding up a mirror without throwing a punch. It reminds them, and you, that their behavior isn't a reflection of your value. Let me tell you about a client of mine, Linda, age 70, who worked as a nurse for over 30 years in Chicago. She's sharp, patient, and deeply kind. After retirement, she started volunteering at a local school. One day, a parent, clearly stressed, snapped at her, "You probably don't understand how modern kids learn anyway." Linda told me it shook her. It wasn't just the words, it was the dismissal of her life's work. But the next time that parent raised their voice, Linda calmly said, "Your words say more about you than they do about me." She said it gently, but firmly. The parent stared at her, stunned, and walked away. There was also Robert, 78, from Boise, who had been helping. At a community food bank, one of the younger volunteers often rolled his eyes and made snide comments like, "Don't worry, I'll carry it. You're probably not up for it." Robert had enough. One morning, after another of those little digs, he stopped, looked the young man in the eye and said, "That says more about you than it does about me." It wasn't angry, it wasn't bitter, but it drew a line in the sand, and the behavior stopped. What I often recommend is this: when someone says something that stings, take a slow breath, pause, then, with quiet confidence, respond with this phrase. You don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to convince them of your value. This one sentence is your anchor. One of the most powerful ways to reclaim your confidence is to refuse to accept someone else's judgment as truth. Words can wound, yes, but only if we let them live inside us. When you respond with calm clarity, you protect your space, your dignity, and your heart. Think of your self-worth like a tree with deep roots. Just because someone throws mud at the trunk doesn't mean the roots are shaken. You have lived, loved, worked, helped, survived. You are not defined by someone else's bad day. Let them keep their mud. You keep your peace. Let me offer you a question that works better than any argument. Do you always speak to older people that way? It's not rude, it's not confrontational, but it gently holds a mirror up to someone's behavior. When, said calmly, this question can make even the most sarcastic person pause and reflect. As we age, we often find ourselves in situations where we're no longer seen for who we are, but for what we represent to others. An old person, someone they think they can dismiss, belittle, or ignore. This kind of treatment, often called ageism, is subtle but deeply harmful. It chips away at your confidence and can leave you feeling invisible. The frustrating part is that many people don't even realize they're doing it. They're not always trying to be cruel, they just aren't aware. That's why a gentle question like this can be so powerful. It raises awareness without starting a fight. When someone speaks to you in a condescending or disrespectful tone, especially because of your age, it can feel like your identity is being reduced to a stereotype. But you are not a stereotype. You are a full person with a life behind you, and your presence deserves to be met with respect. I remember a man named Frank, 74, who lives in Sacramento. He told me how, during a visit to the bank, a young employee spoke to him like he was a child, slowly, with exaggerated gestures. Frank said it wasn't the words, it was the tone that stung. He felt dismissed. Instead of getting angry, he simply looked up and asked, "Do you always speak to older people that way?" The young man froze. He blinked, then quietly apologized. Frank didn't raise his voice or scold him. He just asked a question. And that question did all the work. Or there's Eleanor, 79, from Asheville, who's still very active in her community. One day she was picking up a prescription, and the pharmacist snapped, "You need to follow instructions, ma'am, or you'll mess up your dosage." Eleanor was taken aback. She had been nothing but polite. She looked him in the eye and said, "Is that how you usually speak to people my age?" The pharmacist looked embarrassed and quickly corrected his tone. She told me later she felt a small victory, not because she'd embarrassed him, but because she'd reminded herself that she deserved better. What often works in these moments is asking, not accusing. When you ask a question like, "Do you always talk to older folks that way?" you're giving the person a chance to reflect without forcing them into a corner. It invites awareness, not defensiveness. One of the easiest ways to draw a line is through curiosity, not anger, not sarcasm, just calm, sincere curiosity. And when you do it with a soft tone and steady eye contact, it speaks volumes. It tells them you are present, aware, and not someone to overlook. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to become someone else to be heard. You just have to remind the world gently but clearly that you notice and that you won't let it slide by in silence. You've earned the right to be seen fully. You're not just someone's grandma or an old guy at the store. You're still you, and with one simple question, you can remind others of that truth without ever raising your voice. Sometimes the best way to set a boundary is to remind people of one simple truth. Please speak to me the way you'd want someone to speak to you. It's not sharp, it's not aggressive, it's just human. And when said gently, it can disarm rudeness better than any comeback. Let's talk for a moment about what makes this phrase so effective, especially for older adults. As we age, we often find ourselves on the receiving end of tones and attitudes that feel patronizing, dismissive, or just plain harsh. It's not always about what is said, but how it's said, and over time, these moments add up. Being rushed at the doctor's office, interrupted at the grocery store, brushed off at a family gathering, all these little cuts can lead to something deeper, a quiet erosion of self-respect. One of the challenges I've seen in my years of working with older adults is that many start to internalize this treatment. They don't want to make a scene or be a burden, so they stay silent. But silence isn't always peace. Sometimes silence allows disrespect to grow. That's why this phrase, "Please speak to me the way you'd want someone to speak to you," is such a valuable tool. It's not confrontational, it's a reminder, and it invites empathy. I remember Edna, 81, from Spokane, a former school librarian. One day she called her cable company to ask about her bill. The person on the line sighed loudly and spoke over her again and again. Edna paused, then said calmly, "I'd like you to speak to me the way you'd want someone to speak to your own mother." There was silence on the line. Then a quieter, more respectful tone followed. She told me later that it felt like a small light switched on both ends of the call, and then there was Gerald, 76, from Tampa, who had knee surgery and was staying at a rehab facility for a few weeks. One night a nurse barked at him for pressing the call button too often. He felt humiliated, but instead of snapping back, he said, "Please speak to me the way you'd want someone to speak to you if you were in this bed." The nurse blinked, looked down, and whispered an apology. Gerald told me it wasn't about winning. It was about protecting his dignity without losing his cool. What I often recommend is this. If someone speaks to you with an unkind tone, don't mirror their energy. Don't let their impatience become your mood. Instead, offer them a gentle pause. This phrase is your pause. It's your moment to shift the energy, not by force, but by grace. One of the easiest and kindest ways to change a conversation is to name the behavior without shaming the person. You don't have to lecture. You don't have to explain who you are. All you have to do is say, "Please speak to me the way you'd want someone to speak to you." And then wait. You may be surprised how many people stop and rethink their tone. Some may even thank you later for the reminder. But even if they don't, you will have protected your peace. Think of this phrase as a small umbrella in the rain. It won't stop the storm, but it keeps you dry. And over time, it reminds others to carry their own. Respect doesn't have to be demanded with a shout. It can be requested with calm clarity, and that's a strength all its own. There's a quiet strength in saying something as simple and firm as, "I deserve respect just like you do." No anger, no judgment, just a reminder that your dignity matters. And sometimes that's all it takes to stop someone from speaking down to you or brushing you aside. As we get older, people often forget that we still need to be seen, heard, and treated with the same courtesy we've extended to others our whole lives. But respect isn't something you grow out of. It doesn't retire when you do. And yet I hear it all the time from older adults I work with, being treated like they don't know what's going on, like they don't have a say in their own care, like they're a problem instead of a person. It's subtle sometimes, but it stings. And if it happens enough, it can make you question your value even when you know better. Saying, "I deserve respect just like you do," is a powerful way to draw a line, not to start a fight, but to remind someone that you're still here and you still matter. It doesn't demand anything. It simply affirms what should already be understood. I'll never forget Martha, 80, from Indianapolis. She's sharp, opinionated, and loves crossword puzzles. She told me about a time when her doctor dismissed her concerns during an appointment, saying, "Like, at your age we just manage things, not fix them." Martha sat there, stunned. She took a deep breath and said, "Doctor, I deserve respect just like you do." He looked up from his tablet. Silence. Then he nodded and said, "You're right." That one sentence changed their relationship. From that day on, he listened more carefully. Then there was James, 77, from Dallas, a retired firefighter. He lives in an assisted living community now, and one day a staff member snapped at him for asking for help getting dressed. "You're not helpless," she said. James didn't shout. He just replied, "I deserve respect just like you do." The staff member looked away, embarrassed. She came back later and apologized. James told me that moment wasn't just about that day. It reminded him that he still had a voice. What helps most in these moments is having a phrase like this ready. Not to use in anger, but in clarity. Because when you say, "I deserve respect just like you do," you're not picking a fight. You're holding your space. You're saying, "I'm not less. I'm not invisible. I'm still me." One of the simplest ways to stand tall is to speak your truth without shouting. This phrase doesn't blame, it doesn't belittle, it just resets the balance. And for many older adults, having that balance back can mean everything. Think of it like a quiet bell in a noisy room. It doesn't overpower. It gently draws attention back to what matters. And what matters is this: your presence, your voice, your worth. You've given so much to this world. Don't let anyone act like that doesn't count. Because it does. It always has. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say isn't a statement. It's a choice. A quiet line that sets you free. I choose to speak with people who see me as a person. It's simple, it's calm, and it's a gentle way to walk away from disrespect without needing anyone's permission to do so. Let's talk about why this matters. As we get older, we often find ourselves in situations where people talk at us, not with us. They assume we don't understand, don't care, or don't deserve the same respect they'd give to someone younger. And over time, that can wear you down. It can make you feel like a bother, like you're not worth the effort. But here's what I've learned. The most important conversations you'll ever have are the ones where you choose who deserves your energy and who doesn't. Disrespect doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it's in the sighs, the eye rolls, the rushed tone, the way someone turns their back before you're finished speaking. But you are not obligated to stay in a conversation where you are not being seen, and you certainly don't have to accept poor treatment just because they're young or they're busy. You've earned your place, and it's okay to expect others to meet you there. Let me share a story from my practice. There's a woman named Lillian, 82, from Flagstaff. She still drives, still bakes, still reads a book a week. One day she went to her clinic for a routine checkup. The nurse on duty didn't greet her, rushed through the intake and spoke in a tone that felt cold and mechanical. When Lillian asked a question, the nurse snapped, "Can you just let me finish first?" Lillian didn't raise her voice. She stood up and said, "I choose to speak with people who see me as a person." She gathered her things and calmly asked for another nurse. The supervisor later apologized, and the nurse never treated her that way again. And then there's Thomas, 79, from Denver, who enjoys going to the same cafe every morning. One day, a new barista rolled his eyes when Thomas asked about a change in the menu. "It's right there, sir," he said, tapping the sign. Thomas paused and replied, "That's fine. I'll wait until someone who treats me like a person can help." He stepped aside. Another employee came over immediately with kindness in her tone. That barista never disrespected him again. What often helps in these moments is remembering that you have the right to choose where your energy goes. If someone speaks to you without respect, You don't need to stay, you don't have to argue, you don't even have to explain, just speak your truth and step away. One of the kindest things you can do for yourself is to walk away from conversations that don't honor your humanity. This isn't about being rude, it's about being real. It's about choosing dignity over discomfort. And when you say, I choose to speak with people who see me as a person, you're reminding the world and yourself that your time, presence, and spirit are not for those who can't see them. Think of your voice like a compass. It points you toward what's right for you, what's kind, what's true. And when you follow it, you protect your peace. You don't need to fight to be seen. You just need to keep choosing what honors your worth. And that's a choice no one can take from you. Which of these phrases felt most useful to you today? I'd love to hear in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell for more tools to protect your peace. And always remember this: you are not alone, and your voice still matters, deeply, fully, and always.